What is going on, everyone? So in this week's video, I want to share some of the digital photos I shot on my fall trip. Now you'll notice that you didn't see me shooting the digital camera at all during any of the videos, and there's a reason for that. I just wanted to have some moments to myself without doing the video where I can experiment a little bit with the digital, maybe take some pictures in some fast changing scenes that is just not possible really to do with a film camera, but also without the burden of doing the video as well. I could just have some fun with it. And some of you guys have suggested maybe I should look into getting a medium format digital as opposed to the Sony that I have. But I honestly have no desire for medium format digital. To me, that seems to go down the road of expecting perfection from a digital camera or from any camera for that matter. And I think that's a bad road to go down to because there's no such thing as perfection and you're never going to be satisfied with your work. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love working with film, because with film, it's inherently very imperfect. So it keeps me grounded a little bit. It gives me some guidance. And I think that's also one of the reasons why I'm very satisfied with the film photos, because just so long as I do the best that I can and I have good craftsmanship with everything I'm doing, I'm very satisfied with the results. And with digital, you get into a whole different territory of perhaps expecting perfection. All the photos taken today, all the photos I'm going to show today were taken with the 100 to 400 millimeter lens, which was really fun to work with. The longest lens I have on my film setup is equivalent to maybe an 85 millimeter. So having this huge extended range gives me the ability to shoot some things I wouldn't be able to shoot, but also be able to shoot things that are very fast moving, as with this first example here. So this was taken on my final day in Zion. So this was a couple days after taking my last shot on film. And I found this scene the day before that, but I really like this nice triangular peak here. And I really like this tree right here. So I just had a mental note of the scene, figuring, hey, this would be good for if there's some interesting light or some interesting atmospheric conditions. And so as I was driving through the park, I saw the clouds could light up perhaps at sunrise. And so I scurried up to that peak with the setup, set up the 100 to 400, and just sat there and waited. And sure enough, these really interesting wind-driven clouds appeared, and they were moving really fast through the scene. And at the same time, the sun was peeking out from the clouds and kind of between the clouds and the horizon. And so it was lighting up this peak really nicely. This tree stood out really nicely against the sky around the clouds there, and just fired off a few frames. This was taken maybe at 200 millimeter, somewhere in there, so it's beyond the reach of what I'd be able to do with the large format kit. But also these clouds are moving so fast. There's no way I could shoot anything like this with the film kit. So I really enjoyed being out there that morning and just having the place to myself, experiencing it. And the patchy snow works pretty well here because it helps to give a little bit more definition, as well ties in some of the cooler colors of the sky. I really didn't do much of editing on this at all. In the original raw file, I did a little bit of shadow recovery to get a little bit of detail back from the shadows here. But beyond that, I did a curves adjustment to increase the brightness of the bright tones a little bit, while putting a control point down here on the shadow side to make sure that the shadows didn't brighten up all that much. So just selectively increasing the brightness of the bright areas. Hue saturation, I believe actually I desaturated the reds a little bit. And yellows, I desaturated a little bit as well, just to try to keep these tones here on par with what I saw in person. And no global tweaks to the saturation. So no real editing was necessary on this, just because you have a great subject, you have great light, and found a pretty nice composition. And if you have those elements, you don't really need to do a heck of a lot of editing. It's all about having a really good light. Next up is this photo. This was taken on the same morning that I shot the vertical photo of the cottonwood tree covered in snow set against the sandstone background. And so after shooting those photos, I was driving through the canyon, and by then the sun had come out, and I saw this really interesting area where this diagonal slope here was being backlit by the sun, yet the background was still in shade. So you have a little bit of a warm, cool thing going on. But I've always loved this tree right here. So this tree seems like it's had a bit of a tortured existence in the past. I'm guessing there was a bigger branch, or the trunk continued for quite a ways, but that fell off and it's grown back in this really interesting way. But I really liked how this angle right here mirrored the angle of the slope there. It was still covered in a little bit of snow, it was backlit. There's a lot of reflected light hitting the trunk there. and also a lot of reflected light back in here. You'll notice that this photo, as well as the previous one, actually this one, I think is at the original 3:4 aspect ratio. This one I cropped to a 4:5. My goal with these is to make them all 4:5. I should probably crop this to a 4:5 as well. I don't need quite as much on the left side here. But I like to maintain the same aspect ratio as the 8:10 just for consistency, but also I just really like that aspect ratio. But I really like the way this one turned out, just simple, using the longer side of my 100 to 400 millimeter lens and just picking out this interesting area here. Next up, this is a photo of the cliff. This is above and to the left of this scene. So this is gonna be up over here. And I really like this color contrast where you have these warm tones along with the desert varnish. And it's a very interesting desert varnish too, because you have some red streaks, you have some darker streaks, some yellowish streaks, some whitish streaks. So you have this really interesting area of pattern and texture here, and it's grounded against this area of snow with a little bit of a circular motion here. The trees give a sense of scale the longer you look at it. There's also some light hitting the cliffs up in here. So essentially I'm just aiming the long lens around, trying to find anything to point the camera at that has some degree of the snow and the subtle reflected light. And these are photos where I'm pretty happy with them. I don't know that I'm ever going to do anything with them. We'll see. But it was definitely a really, really amazing morning to be in Zion, to just have scenes like this everywhere you look. It was such a very special morning. This is another abstract-y sort of image found in one of the canyon walls. And on this one, I'm pretty sure I had the lens zoomed in most of the way to 400. But I like this shape right here. It reminded me of Sonic the Hedgehog. But you have this interesting spiral shape here. You have the snow and ice covered cliffs set against the warm tones of the sandstone there. So again, you get this warm, cool thing going on. The only thing is I wish the light was more dynamic here. A bit more reflected light to give the scene a little bit more depth. But that being said, I did enjoy the shape that I found there. And the 100 to 400 really made it easy to find some interesting compositions like that. This is the same pool of frozen water with the cottonwood leaves as the photo I shot on the 8x10. This is a scene a little bit off to the right of that area. And after shooting the photo on the 8x10, I wanted to photograph these leaves, and then there were some other leaves as well with the 8x10, and do maybe a panoramic crop. But that's when my camera shifted awkwardly and it stripped the gears on my Arca Swiss cube head. So I grabbed my digital kit instead, went over there and just tried to find some abstract shots there. But the ice has all these really interesting patterns in it, and I used the 100 to 400 lens to aim straight down, and thankfully that lens has a really good close focus ability, so I was able to find a nice, simple, centered composition. I did like the way the leaves are overlaid like this. And as with most scenes I shoot that have some leaves or organic debris of some sort in there, when you zoom in close, you start to see dead bugs. But in this case, we have a ladybug, which is interesting. I did not notice that when I was shooting the photo. So that was a little bit of a surprise after the fact to see it in there. But I like the patterns in the ice. It reminded me of galvanized metal, just these different dark and light colored areas of ice there, and then the bubbles. Depth of field's a bit tricky on this scene. If I was shooting a scene like this on 8x10, it'd be a lot easier because you can have the plane of focus follow the ice and you'll get everything in focus. But since I'm shooting at a little bit of an angle, and since I didn't want to stop down too far, I didn't want to mess with focus stacking, I just made sure the most important part right here was in focus. But you see down here, a little outside the depth of field, and up here, a little outside the depth of field. But that does not bug me at all. If anything, it just makes it seem a little bit more real. So pretty cool scene to find there. Now this one, I feel, even though the camera's perfectly level for this one, I feel like it's not quite balanced as well. I feel like, well, there seems to be an inherent lean to the image. And I think that's one of the things I'm used to when working with an image on the ground glass. You have this image right in front of you, and you can tweak it a little bit to maybe make it not actually level, but to make it visually level. And in this case, this cloud was moving really, really fast. And working with the Sony, even though I got the viewfinder there, even though I got the rear screen, it's not the same experience as working with an 8x10 camera where you can see this image about the same size as you see on the monitor here, and you can really get a better feeling for how things balance. So I find that with the Sony, I don't have quite the same accuracy of composition as I do with the 8x10. But it is nice to be able to at least photograph a scene like this that was changing so fast. There's no way I could possibly shoot it on the 8x10 because that cloud would be gone by the time I even pulled off the dark cloth and got a film holder in there, let alone figuring out the exposure and everything else along those lines. So the takeaway is that I love working with the digital. I thought that perhaps seeing the ease of use of digital would lure me more into that direction and make me, in some ways, maybe resent how much work it takes on film. But that wasn't the case at all. If anything, it reaffirmed my appreciation of film and the process of seeing that large image on the ground glass, finding the composition, dialing it in, waiting for that perfect moment. So it really reaffirmed my love of shooting film. But at the same time, I don't demand perfection from the digital, which I think was a trap I ran into in the past when I had a digital, and also the reason why I have no desire for a medium format digital, where I see it as something fun, something to pull out on a moment's notice. I probably won't film any video while I shoot digital because I just want to have this little moment just to myself where I can experiment a little bit, have some fun, and when you do video at the same time, it complicates things a little bit. But I hope you guys enjoyed the images. It was definitely a fun experience working with the digital. But those of you who enjoy my film work, don't worry, that's not going anywhere. But I will supplement it with some of the digital stuff as well so you can get a better feeling for some of those things out there that I just don't have the time to shoot on film because it changes so fast. But I want to thank everyone for watching, and we'll see you around next time.